You remember when you were younger, when you had that kind of innocence, believing that if you were truly there for people, fully, without counting the cost, they would be there for you the same way? You replied to everyone. You gave your time without watching the clock. Someone needed to talk at midnight. You were there. Someone had a problem on a Sunday morning. You picked up. You had that generosity, a little naive, a little beautiful, of believing the world would give back what you gave it. And for a long time, you didn't see that it didn't work that way. You kept going. You became the reliable one, the one who always responds, the one who is always available, always connected, so present that nobody noticed anymore. Like the Wi-Fi, you only realize it exists when it cuts out. And then one day you cut out. No drama, no announcement. You just stopped. You didn't reply right away. You didn't call back within 30 minutes. You left a message on read, not to provoke, not to play games, just because you had nothing to say, or because you didn't have the energy, or because for the first time, you chose not to be the one who fills the void, and things started to shift. So, in this video, I want us to talk about that, about what happens when you withdraw. Not withdraw like a hermit on a mountain, not cut off the entire world, not become that mysterious guy the videos are trying to sell you. I'm talking about something simpler and harder at the same time. I'm talking about stopping being available by default. You remember the moment you felt something was off? It was maybe one evening. One of those evenings where you had replied to everyone, done favors for 2 people, held 3 conversations at the same time on your phone. And when you finally put the phone down, when you finally had silence, there was nothing. Not sadness, not tiredness, just a void. Like you had spent the day handing out pieces of yourself, and nothing was left for you. And the thought was, that's strange. I should feel good. I helped so many people. But no, you were empty. A corridor with no one inside. That void, you know it. You try to fill it. You light up the screen again. You scroll. You look for a message. Anything. Because silence is honest. And honesty is not what you're looking for at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night when you're exhausted. Machiavelli understood this before anyone else. He who makes himself indispensable to everyone ends up belonging to everyone. And belonging to everyone means belonging to no one, least of all yourself. If you really let that idea sink in, if you let it truly land, something happens. Being so present for everyone that you end up absent from your own life. From the outside, it looks like goodness. It looks like someone with a good heart. But from the inside, you know it's something else. You know what it really is? It's surveillance. You are surveilling yourself. You measure your worth by how fast you reply. One unread message, and you feel that tension in your stomach, like you did something wrong. You unlock your phone for no reason, just to check. And let's be honest, it's not just to see if someone needs you. It's to see if someone is thinking about you. If you've been liked, mentioned, included, if you exist in someone else's mind. It's ego disguised as availability, and you don't admit it to yourself. Because it sounds better to say, I'm there for people, than to say, I need people to be there for me. Jung called this the persona. That mask you build to be accepted, to be loved, to not be rejected. And your persona was the reliable guy, the available guy, the one you can count on. You wore that mask so well that you ended up believing it was your real face. And this goes back a long way. Back to the time when you learned, without anyone telling you in words, that love is earned. That if you are useful, people love you. And if you are not useful, well, you saw what happened to the kids who were no use in the schoolyard. They were invisible. And you swore to yourself you would never be invisible. So you became indispensable to your friends, your family, your colleagues, to people you don't even really love but keep helping out. Because otherwise, Otherwise, what exactly? Otherwise, they'd love you less? Otherwise, you'd be worth less? Nobody signed a contract saying be available 24 hours a day, or it's over. You imposed that on yourself. And you ended up believing it was the deal. Jung had a word for that part of you that you buried to wear that mask. He called it the shadow. Everything you set aside, your needs, your limits, your anger, your desire to exist for yourself and not for others. And the shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It grows. And one day it comes back out, not always gracefully. And then one day, I can't tell you exactly when, it came in several waves. One day you felt you couldn't take it anymore. Not dramatically, not a breakdown, just a weariness, a tiredness that doesn't come from the body, but from somewhere deeper. You looked at your phone and said to yourself, not now, and you didn't reply to anything, and the world didn't collapse. People managed. Some even found the answer on their own. And you had recovered something you hadn't had in a long time. Time for nothing, time for yourself, time without a function. And that time had a strange texture. Not rest, not a vacation. It was, how to put it, space. Space for things to come back up. Desires you had forgotten. Pieces of yourself you had packed away in a drawer to make room for others. But first, and nobody tells you this, first it hurts. Disappearing even a little, it hurts. Not for others, for you. You feel like you're doing something wrong. You feel selfish. There's that voice in your head. You know it. It's been there forever. Telling you if you don't reply, people will forget you. And that voice lies. But it lies so convincingly that you take it for your own thought. Jung called this the complex. A voice that sounds like yours, but is made of all the fears that were passed down to you since childhood. The fear of rejection, the fear of not being enough, the fear of existing without being useful. That's not you speaking. That's the sum of all the times you were taught that your value is negotiable. Machiavelli was surgical about this. He knew that men rarely act out of pure disinterested love. They act out of interest, out of habit, out of a need for security. And you, by always being available, provided that security for free, without ever asking anything in return. You played the generosity card, but forgot the basic rule. What is given without a price is consumed without gratitude. Withdraw into yourself. That's not a mystical instruction. It's a survival strategy. No mountain needed, no vacation. Just return to yourself, sit with yourself, and endure what you find. Endure, that's the word. Because when you turn down the volume, when you put the phone down and stay with yourself with nothing to distract you, there is noise inside too. Questions you have been pushing back. Emotions you have been covering with activity. As long as you were busy answering others, you didn't have to answer yourself. And now that the silence is here, all those questions arrive at the same time. And that is why many people stay permanently available. Not out of generosity, out of escape. Jung was direct about this. As long as a man flees what is inside him, he is governed by what he flees. You think you are choosing to be available. In reality, your fear is choosing for you. And a man governed by his fear, however active, however useful, is a man who has not yet decided to meet himself. You know what's strange? That availability exhausts you, but also reassures you. Because as long as you are useful, you exist. And the day you put the phone down and nobody asks you for anything, you find yourself face to face with something you have been avoiding for years. Who am I when nobody needs me? And that question, I'll be honest, it brought me to my knees. Because I had built my entire life around that. The reliable guy, the one you can count on. And when I removed that pillar, there was a moment of drifting, a moment where I no longer knew quite who I was. And that's normal. That's even the point. Jung called this individuation. That painful process where you move from what others have made of you to what you truly are. And that passage is never comfortable. It requires you to cross that drifting without drowning in it, without going back to the mask you knew. That drifting is not pleasant, but that's where it happens. A man who has done that work no longer needs to seek outside what can only be found within. And you don't understand that by reading about it. You understand it by living it, by passing through that strange zone where you are no longer the available guy, but not yet the man at peace. And the temptation, believe me, it's strong, is to go back, to pick up the phone again, to become the one who replies to everything again, because it's familiar. Because at least when you're useful, you don't have to wonder if you have value. And you know what? I went back several times. There were evenings where I held out for 2 days without responding to anyone, and on the third day, I cracked. I picked up the phone, replied to everyone, said yes to a plan I didn't want to do. And for 5 minutes, I felt better, useful, connected. And then the void came back stronger than before, because now I knew what I was doing. I could no longer tell myself it was kindness. I knew it was fear, and there is nothing worse than doing something while knowing exactly why you shouldn't be doing it. It's a bit like a guy who stops smoking and picks up a cigarette after 3 days. The cigarette is not better, it's worse, because now he smokes with the full awareness of what he is doing. And it's the same with availability. Once you have tasted silence, true silence, the one where you have nobody to satisfy, going back into the noise has a different taste. A taste of concession. And you feel it. But if you hold on, and I promise you nothing, I don't know how long it takes, if you hold on through that discomfort, you start to hear yourself. Your own thoughts, your own desires, not those of others, yours. The ones you had forgotten under layers of, yes, of course, no problem, whatever you want. And you know what? There's a word for what you lived through all those years. Machiavelli, in his Coldest Analyses, described those men who exhaust themselves pleasing everyone and end up with no real power, neither over their life nor over others. He called it a form of voluntary servitude disguised as virtue. You are overwhelmed, you are exhausted, you replied to 40 messages, you helped 3 people, you ran all day. And if someone asked you, what did you do for yourself this week? Silence, nothing. You did nothing for yourself. You gave your entire day to others, and all that was left for you were the crumbs of the evening. And with those crumbs in the evening, that's where you take your revenge. You scroll, you watch anything, you stay up too late, because it's the only moment of the day that belongs to you. Except it's a trap. You are not recovering. You are digging the hole even deeper. And the next day, you're exhausted. So you have even less energy for yourself. So in the evening, you start again. Real withdrawal is not about stealing time from your night. It's about protecting time within your day. Even 10 minutes in the morning, even a walk without earphones, even a coffee drunk slowly without doing anything else. That time looks insignificant, but it's what saves you. Because it's in those 10 minutes that you find yourself again, not in 3 hours of scrolling at 2 a.m. Now I want to talk to you about something important. The difference between being alone and being isolated. Because when I say disappear, there's always someone who hears, cut off the world and become a savage. No. Isolation is when the world rejects you, or when you reject it out of bitterness. Chosen solitude is when you withdraw to refill yourself. And the difference between the two comes down to one single word: choice. Machiavelli drew this distinction very clearly between the prince, who isolates himself out of weakness, and then the prince who withdraws by calculation. One flees, the other prepares. And that preparation, that voluntary silence, is where true power is built. Not power over others, Power over oneself. You know, there is a moment in that kind of transition between the guy who is always there and the guy who chooses when he is there, where you feel something strange. You catch yourself looking out the window, listening to the sounds of the street as if you had never paid attention before, noticing details that were always there, but that you had never seen because your attention was elsewhere. It's not meditation. It's not an exercise. It's just you without a filter, you without a role to play. And at first, it's uncomfortable. And then one day it becomes your favorite thing. You remember an evening where you had nothing planned? Not an evening where you canceled a plan. An evening where there was just nothing. And you hesitated between calling someone, going somewhere, finding something to do. And then finally, you did nothing. You stayed home. And at first, it was strange. And then, after an hour, you felt something you hadn't felt in a long time. A calm, not the calm of exhaustion. A calm of when nothing is missing. That moment is the beginning. It's the first return home. Have you ever noticed that the most interesting people you know are often the hardest to reach? Not because they're playing a role, because they're comfortable with themselves. When you're with them, you feel they're truly there. Not halfway, not with one eye on the phone. Entirely present. And that presence comes from the fact that they spend time alone, that they have cultivated something inside, that they have accepted not being reachable all the time. The less available you are, the more your presence is worth. It's a rule Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. Scarcity creates desire. What is always there is not desired, it is consumed. It's like a light that stays on permanently. After a while, you forget it exists. But a light that goes out from time to time, when it comes back, you see it. And I know what you're telling yourself. If I disappear, people will resent me. And that's true. Some will resent me. I lived that. People who were used to me always being there, who felt the ground shake when I started to withdraw. Some understood. They gave me my space, and when I came back, it was like before. Others got worried. They called me, not because they needed me, but because they cared about me. And then there were those who got angry, who blamed me for not replying, who made me feel guilty. And that's where you learn something you didn't want to know. And I'm warning you, this is the hardest part of this entire video. When you withdraw, you see who is there because they love you and who is there because you are useful to them. Machiavelli would have stated it coldly. Men love you according to what you bring them, not according to what you are. And he would have added that this truth is not a tragedy. It is strategic information of the highest value. Because once you know who is who, you can finally choose where to put your energy. You stop scattering yourself. You stop investing where there is no return. There are people in your life, and you know exactly who I'm talking about, who are only there because you do them favors. Remove that and look at what remains. Look at who calls you when you have nothing to offer. Look at who checks on you when it's you who's struggling and you have nothing interesting to say. Look at who stays when you're not funny, not useful, not accommodating. Just you. It's brutal, but it's necessary. And I'll tell you, when I did that sorting consciously, it made me angry. Because I was realizing that people I thought were close were just used to me, the way you get used to a piece of furniture. And the day the furniture is gone, they don't say, I miss it. They say, it's strange without it. It's not the same thing. And it hurts, but it's a useful pain. Because behind that anger, there is relief. The relief of no longer having to play a role nobody asked you to play. Accept yourself. And there's something else I want to tell you while I'm at it. When you start to withdraw, you'll go through a period. It could last a few days, a few weeks. I don't know. A period where you'll feel guilty about nothing. About not replying. About not being there. About not helping. And that guilt will try to pull you back into the old pattern. It will tell you, you are selfish, you are ungrateful, people are counting on you. And those words are powerful because they sound true. But ask yourself one question, just one. Do these people feel guilty when they don't reply to you? Do these people feel guilty when it's you who needs them and they're not there? There you go. You know the answer. The guilt you feel is one-sided. You produced it and you suffer it. Jung called this an introjected injunction, a rule that was imposed on you from the outside, often in childhood, and that you have repeated so often internally that it became your voice. But it is not your voice. It is the voice of someone who needed you to be available for them. And that person may be dead. They may have been gone for a long time, and you are still obeying their rules. Others simply found someone available. And if it's no longer you, it will be someone else. And that too is hard to hear. But it's the truth. Think of all those evenings where you replied to messages that could have waited. All those "how are you?" messages you sent without wanting the answer. That's not connection. That's filler. And filler costs exactly as much as a real conversation. Except it brings nothing. You know how much energy you recover when you stop being available for everyone? Every message you reply to is a micro-choice. Every "how are you?" is a transfer of attention. After 50 micro-choices in a day, you have nothing left. And when you keep that energy, even for just one evening, you feel the difference. You're sharper. You have ideas you haven't had in months. You read a book and you retain what you read. It's not magic. It's just that you stopped draining yourself. Machiavelli talked about this in terms of forces. A prince who scatters his resources across all fronts at once ends up losing everywhere. A prince who concentrates his forces where it counts, where the stakes are real, there he wins. And your attention is your most precious resource. More than your money, more than your time. Because without it, neither money nor time serve any purpose. Freedom is not being able to do everything you want. It is not being a slave to what you want. And when that need to be loved, to be seen, to matter to someone controls you to the point where you cannot leave a message unanswered for an hour, it is no longer a need. It is a chain. And the chain is not around your wrist. It is around your attention. Have you ever tried to think about something important? Really think about it, not just turn it over between two messages, and realize you are incapable of holding the thought for 3 minutes? You don't have a concentration problem. You have a habit problem. You have spent years fragmenting your attention across 1,000 demands, and now when you try to gather it back, it no longer knows how. It's like a guy who hasn't run in 5 years trying to run a marathon. The body knows it's possible, but the muscles are no longer there. And it's the same with attention. It rebuilds slowly, starting small. 1 meal without a phone. 1 commute without earphones. 5 minutes in the morning doing nothing, literally nothing. Not meditating, not breathing deeply, not being in the present moment. Just nothing. And you'll realize that nothing is hard. That nothing demands more strength than doing 1,000 things at once. Because when you do nothing, there's no longer any noise to cover what you're truly feeling. Jung said that everything you do not make conscious manifests in your life as fate. And that is exactly what happens when you escape into activity, into permanent availability. You think you are acting. In reality, you are being acted upon. By your fear, by your need, by the shadow you have never faced. And one day that shadow comes back out, often at the worst moment, often in the least chosen way. Because everything we repress eventually finds an exit. There is a difference between being present and being available. You are available when you reply to everyone. You are present when you are truly there for someone. And often the two are mutually exclusive. The more available you are for everyone, the less present you are for anyone. People feel it even if they say nothing. Do you remember the last time someone talked to you and you truly listened? Not preparing your answer in your head, not glancing at your screen. Truly listened, as if nothing else existed at that moment. That's rare, right? And when it happens to you, when someone gives you that quality of attention, you feel it immediately. You feel seen. You feel important. Not because the person is flattering you or giving you compliments, just because they are fully there. And that quality of presence, you cannot give it if you are plugged into 15 conversations at once. You cannot give it if half of your brain is occupied by a message you haven't replied to yet. You can only give it if you have space. And space is created by withdrawing, by accepting not being everywhere. Nobody tells you this about relationships, that the best conversations of your life didn't happen when you were in the middle of 100 things. They happened after a silence, after a moment alone, when you had digested your own thoughts and could finally be there. For someone without a hidden agenda, Machiavelli advised the prince to know how to alternate between the lion and the fox. Strength when necessary, cunning and strategy when more effective. And what you learn by withdrawing is exactly that. You learn to no longer react automatically. You learn to choose. You learn to respond from a place of calm and clarity rather than from fear or guilt. And a man who responds from clarity is infinitely more powerful in his relationships, in his work, in his life, than a man who reacts to everything constantly. Your inner peace is worth more than the approval of others. And nobody ever talks about the courage that requires. We always talk about the courage to speak up, the courage to fight, the courage to move forward. But the courage to stay silent, the courage to sit with yourself without moving, the courage to let people figure things out without you, nobody celebrates that. Because from the outside, it looks like nothing. A guy doing nothing, not replying, not being there. But from the inside, and you know this, it is one of the hardest things you have ever done. Staying still when everything inside you is screaming to move, to respond, to fill the void, to be of service. And nobody is going to congratulate you for that. Nobody is going to say, "Well done, you didn't reply to a message." The day you disappeared, nobody noticed right away. It came gradually. First you took a little longer to reply. Then you started spending evenings alone without feeling guilty. Then you realized that silence was not an absence. It was a return. And when you came back, because you always come back, it's not an escape. You were not the same. You were calmer, more, how to say it, more whole. People felt it, not because you had changed something visible, but because you were there, truly there. For once you were not half in the conversation and half in your head, and I had not anticipated that. The people who love you, the real ones, they don't love you less when you are less available. They love you better. Because when you come back to them after taking time for yourself, you give them someone complete. Not a leftover, not an exhausted guy pretending to listen while thinking about something else. Someone who chose to be there. And that quality of presence is worth more than any favor you could ever do. Have you ever watched a couple in a restaurant? Two people sitting face to face and both of them on their phone? They are together, but they are nowhere. And then from time to time, you see another one. Two people talking to each other, looking at each other, and you feel that there is nobody else in the room for them. And you tell yourself, that's what I want. And you cannot have that if you are connected to everyone permanently. You can have that only if you have learned to disconnect, to choose who receives your attention. Because attention is the only thing you have that is truly worth something. And you hand it out as if it were infinite. It's not. There are days when it's harder than others. Days when the urge to reply to everything is stronger, when the silence is scarier than usual. That's normal. It's a muscle. and a muscle doesn't strengthen in a week. But every time you choose to return to yourself, instead of running toward others, you rebuild yourself a little. And I wanted to tell you before finishing, I wish someone had told me this 10 years ago, that you have the right to be unreachable. You have the right to not reply. You have the right to spend an entire day without talking to anyone, and to not feel guilty about it. You have the right to close your phone, to walk in the street without a destination, to sit somewhere and watch time pass. You have the right to have no excuse for that. You have the right to say, I just wanted some peace, and for that to be enough. Nobody is going to give you that permission. You have to give it to yourself, and the day you do, truly without guilt, it is one of the best things you will ever feel in your life. Jung called this accomplished individuation, not becoming perfect, but becoming yourself, truly yourself, with your shadows, with your needs, with your limits. Not the persona you wore to be loved. You and one day, I don't know when, you realize you no longer need to be everywhere to exist. That you no longer need to be everyone's Wi-Fi to have value. That day, you are free, not free in the dramatic sense. Free in the sense that you wake up and you know the day belongs to you before it belongs to anyone else. And if you're listening to this tonight, or on your commute, or any time at all, and you recognize yourself in what I said, then maybe this is the moment. Not the moment to change everything, not the moment to make a grand gesture. Just a moment to put down the phone, to close your eyes for 5 seconds, to take a breath, and to remind yourself that you are here, that you exist beyond what you do for others, that you have the right to disappear a little in order to find yourself completely. Take care of yourself, and those who come looking for you when you have disappeared, those ones, keep them.